So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, at the Boxer Works. Friday afternoon. It's raining. It's about 4 o'clock, and I'm just working through another gearbox. I've got a little mountain of them over there to do. You can see them all lined up there on the bench, and plenty of other things going on here. We're all working away quietly at our little individual jobs. That's Andrew servicing a bike, replacing some brakes. Paul's down there trying to figure out how to fix a little problem he's got with the drive shaft, and it happens. Back here, I'm over here in no man's land, and we've got this gearbox. Now this came out of an R80 ST. It's had a fairly hard life, this. The big bearing had collapsed completely when I took it apart, and in there are some interesting things and outcomes that I thought might be worthwhile. Although I've done plenty of gearbox videos, I thought it might be worthwhile just showing you some of the things that have come around with this. On this particular shaft, this is the output shaft, I've had to replace first gear bush, this dog, this gear and fifth gear. I pulled apart, and you do need a very good press to punch these apart. 3 intermediate shafts to get the gears that I needed to put it back together again. Fortunately, the shafts I had damaged gears on them too, which is why they were replaced completely, but I did manage to get 1 gear off each and save the others. So that worked out fairly nicely. But in the process of putting them all together to make sure that they were right, I did go a bit overboard, and I did one of my super deluxe type finishes where that's just oil on there, by the way. I just had to take the camera away and have a look. I had a little palpitation there for a second. We did polish up the shafts completely. We polished the teeth on the gears to get all the detritus off there that had been there on some of them for a couple of years. They've been lying around in my shed. And then I did the whole let's go to town on it thing, and you can see in here, these are the slip rings that the shift forks run in. So they look shiny on the top, but it's not actually the top that you want to polish so much. It's here on the sides where the shift forks push against the faces here to move these backwards and forwards. And then anyway, it's just worked out that the gearbox has been kind of blueprinted almost, or race blueprinted, or whatever anybody wants to call it. Fixed is what I call it. We've done our usual job of going through and polishing all the gear up until it's gleaming. That gets rid of all the old crap and burnt on oil and stuff, but it also takes out any little burrs and nicks that might be in there. We've turned them from a little raised part in a couple of areas into a little indent which will slide away. What I do with these things is I go, and it's a bit hard in the strong light that's here, but the shiny bits that you can see are where there are witness marks that I can see. Some of the parts have been touching each other, like around on the back here. Anywhere that I see a shiny mark like that, these shift quadrant pieces are really prevalent. This is where the underside of the famous spring that breaks all the time goes in there, touches on here and around the back, and you can actually see on this one to a degree it's worn enough so that it's actually worn kind of a bit of an indent around in there. And the spring, it's a miracle it hasn't broken, because it's over here and it's actually spread and twisted and still in one piece. There's a new one that goes back in, and there are the other 2 new ones sitting over there. On the detent itself, we took a nylon ball away and we put on a roller ball bearing. Now that I've heard people say they make brass bushes and things. That's fine. I use a ball bearing, but here's why. That originally was just a white nylon disc. The thickness of the width you can see there on my finger, and it must have jammed up on the shaft somehow, and over time, look what it's done. The shift cam that it runs on has worn it down in several places, so it's kind of all wobbly and funny. That would have been an interesting gear shift to try. I never did get to ride it. So Same with the shift forks. Again, be hard to see, but we polished them to a mirror finish. Where they run in the cams, the same, and we, through the centre of them here, I haven't done these ones yet, we use a very fine trocus cloth rolled up into a cylinder, and we polish all the gunch out of the inside of them. We don't make them shine necessarily, but we do make them nice and clean and smooth. Same with all the rotating surfaces in the various places. We polish them up, get all the crap off them so that they spin nicely. And this is the other thing I wanted to show you. Inside the gearbox on the input shaft, this is an input shaft. It's got a new sleeve on it and a new bearing that I still have to put. The bearing itself is on a separate, it's a roller ball and a roller bearing, sorry, and it's on its own sleeve which gets pressed onto the shaft. That takes some doing sometimes. And along the splines in the shaft, this shiny bit here takes the only gear that's on that shaft, which is the helical input gear, and it goes on the smooth. You can see it's got no teeth in it, it just spins, but the bit that has got the teeth in it is the bit that goes up against it, and it runs up and down here on these splines. Now these things in situ are actually quite difficult to determine whether they're good or not, because when they're sitting on the shaft like that with a big spring behind them and they're on the end of the shaft and it's all put together in assembly like that, from the bearing there back on that shaft, it's very difficult to tell whether they're in good condition or not. So I just make a habit of pulling them apart and have a look anyway, even though getting the snap ring out that holds the whole assembly together is quite a pain in the neck, but it's worth doing because then you can sort of save yourself a whole lot of trouble. If you look closely at this, you can see that the cam on this cush drive is worn completely away on the drive side on both edges of this. See that? You can actually see it's gouged down to nothing, and it's gone down so far that it's actually broken a piece. Again, it's hard to see, but it's broken a piece out of there and damaged. See how that's not curved anymore, it's bitten into here. So in my view, it's not very long until that would have broken off or done some serious damage. For those of you who've never seen an X gear, there's an X gear. That's a 17.5 degree gear. The one without an X is a 15 degree. If you're fiddling around in your gearbox and you've never done it before, do make sure that if the gears are X, they are all X. If they have no X, they are all no X. Because if you don't, you're going to spend a lot of money that would have been better spent getting somebody else to do the job. This is a shift cam that has done a little work. To give you a better idea what it should look like, that one there is reusable. It's not too bad at all. It's nearly new actually. So we'll use that, and I've had to buy a new one of these gears because I couldn't source one good one amongst my spares. And there you go. This is the cush drive itself. So that goes along here like this under enormous tension. That goes along the spline. And this one here is free running. So when you let the clutch out and there's a big whack through your gearbox, this cog climbs up along the cam on that cush there, pushed ahead by that big spring, and it absorbs the shock from going through the gearbox. Same thing when you back off the throttle, that's the same. On the later model bikes, there is a corresponding cush drive in the tail shaft so that you cushion the universals and the gearbox from either end. So there you go. There's a little bit of just something to think about on this rainy day. That's some of the things we do on gearboxes to try and make them work better for our customers. And I thought you might be interested in seeing what a cush drive looks like and what a broken cush drive looks like. Ride safely, stay well, till we meet again.